The smell of burnt cedar and old grease was so thick it felt like a physical weight on Arjun's chest. He woke up coughing, his lungs screaming for fresh air, but the air around him was stagnant, tasting of centuries-old soot. As his eyes adjusted to the suffocating darkness, he realized he wasn't in his hotel room. He was lying on a cold, charred marble floor. Above him, the skeletal remains of a grand chandelier swung slightly, though there was no wind. It groaned, a metallic, rhythmic sound that mimicked a human sob. Arjun tried to stand, but his hand slipped on a layer of fine gray ash that covered everything like a winter snowfall. This was the Dastur Haveli. He recognized the intricate, half-melted carvings on the pillars, but that was impossible. The Dastur Haveli had been reduced to a hollow shell in a massive fire exactly 30 years ago. Local legend said the fire was so hot it turned the stones to glass. Yet here he was, trapped inside a structure that felt terrifyingly solid. He checked his phone. No signal. The screen light flickered, illuminating a figure standing at the far end of the long corridor. It was Siddharth, the local guide who had promised to show him the ruins from the outside. Siddharth was standing perfectly still, his back turned to Arjun. His clothes were pristine, untouched by the soot that covered every other inch of the room. Arjun called out to him, his voice cracking. Siddharth didn't move. The only response was the sound of a distant, frantic scratching coming from behind the heavy teak doors that lined the hallway. Arjun remembered the history now, the stories of how the doors had swelled shut during the heat of the 1996 fire, trapping the residents inside. He approached Siddharth, hoping for a way out, but as he got closer, he noticed something chilling. Siddharth wasn't breathing. His shoulders weren't rising or falling. He was simply staring at a wall that was covered in framed portraits, all of them charred beyond recognition, except for one. The portrait showed a young man who looked exactly like Arjun, wearing a traditional sherwani, smiling a hollow, frozen smile. Panic set in. Arjun grabbed Siddharth's shoulder to shake him, but the guide's skin felt unnaturally cold, like dry ice. Siddharth slowly turned his head. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with an ancient terror. He didn't speak, but he slowly raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the grand entrance of the Haveli. The massive double doors were bolted with heavy iron chains that looked brand new, glowing red as if they had just been pulled from a forge. The temperature in the room began to rise rapidly. Arjun felt the floor beneath his boots grow hot. A low hum started to vibrate through the walls, the sound of 1,000 whispers merging into a single roar of fire. He looked back at Siddharth, but the guide was gone. In his place was a scorched silhouette on the floor. A shadow burned into the marble. Arjun ran toward the main doors, his footsteps echoing like gunshots in the empty hall. He pulled at the chains, but they seared his palms. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, his own. He screamed, kicking the wood, but it was like hitting solid rock. Through the cracks in the door, he didn't see the moonlit forest he expected. He saw a wall of orange, swirling flame. The fire wasn't outside, the fire was now. He realized with a sickening jolt that he wasn't in the ruins of the past. He was somehow experiencing the final moments of the Haveli in real time. Every 70 seconds, the heat intensified. The scratching behind the side doors turned into desperate pounding. Muffled screams began to leak through the wood. Suddenly, Siddharth reappeared, standing right next to the red-hot chains. His face was melting, the skin dripping away like candle wax to reveal the charred bone beneath. He reached out and touched the lock. With a heavy clank, the chains fell away. Siddharth looked at Arjun one last time, his voice a dry hiss that seemed to come from the wind itself, telling him to run and never look back. Arjun lunged through the doors, falling face first into the damp, cool grass of the jungle. He scrambled away, gasping for air, and turned around to look at the Haveli. There was no fire. There were no screams. The Dastur Haveli stood before him just as it had for 30 years, a blackened, roofless skeleton of stone, overgrown with wild vines. It was silent and dead. Arjun looked at his hands. They weren't burned. They were perfectly clean. But as he reached into his pocket to find his phone, his fingers brushed against something cold. He pulled it out. It was a heavy, blackened iron key, still warm to the touch, with a tag attached. The ink on the tag was fresh, and it bore his own name, written in his own handwriting, dated January 1996.